Let's begin. Can you find your space and lie on your backs? And I'll remind you of certain things as we go through. This is a lesson that, to be honest, I'm not going to be able to tell what you're doing other than whether you've actually followed my guidance to lie in certain positions. So just lie on your back and sense how you're making contact with the floor. And as you're settling in, just talk a little bit about the plan. So our breathing, so this whole lesson is a breathing lesson, and it's my version of a very classic Feldenkrais lesson, and it's one of my favourite lessons, I think. So I hope that you're going to enjoy exploring it and being curious about the questions. So in Feldenkrais we ask questions, and those questions are to guide your attention. So those questions are in your, it doesn't matter whether you can answer them, possibly you won't be able to have an answer, but it's in the searching and in the asking the question that you might find something interesting starts to happen. So as far as breathing goes, it's an amazing thing and controlled by our autonomic nervous system. And we have very little control over it. We don't have control over whether it happens or not. What we do have control over is when we breathe. We can change the length of the inhale, the length of the exhale. But when we're working, we're in a functional sort of situation, every breath organizes itself differently. So every breath that you take is slightly different, which is a wonderful thing. And it organizes itself according to its function. So if you're going for a run, you breathe differently to if you're lying in bed going to sleep. If you're playing a wind instrument or singing, your breathing organizes differently, and also it organizes differently according to your emotional intention. It changes also according to your emotional state at that moment in time. So the way that your nervous system, how fired up maybe your sympathetic nervous system is, or whether you're resting and your parasympathetic nervous system is more dominant. And the other thing about when we control the breathing, it's if we feel the breath in a different place, we can sort of move the breath around. In order to do that, we have to stop the breath in one place in order to feel movement somewhere else. So this lesson is going to give us a little bit of an opportunity to explore that and then see what your breathing's like when we come to the end of it, and you maybe come back to having a sing or playing your instrument again. Hopefully everybody's done a little bit of a reference so that you'll feel a difference afterwards. So you can have your legs bent with your feet on the floor flat, or you can have them longed for the moment, whichever's comfortable. And we'll just do a short scan before we actually start the lesson properly. So sense in particular the contact of your ribs and your back with the floor. So how is that organized? What do you notice? When we're lying on the floor, we get a lot of information back from the floor. So what sort of information are you getting back from the floor into your back? Can you sense how many of your ribs are in touch with the floor? That's a very challenging thought sometimes, because we feel this sort of just this big area that's making contact. And how about your shoulder blades? So some people's shoulder blades stick out a little bit more behind them and you'll feel like a little edge maybe, or you may feel that it's flat. There's no right, no wrong. Just notice what you notice. Do you have a space between your shoulder blades? Is there a space where your ribs are no longer, or your back's no longer in touch with the floor? Whether you can feel that part of your spine on the floor or whether you find that that's a little bit lifted. And then do you get a sense of how your breath changes that contact with the floor? So as you breathe in, do you feel that you're making more contact with the floor? Maybe around your ribs, maybe under your lower back. And how three-dimensional is that awareness of yourself? So you could almost think of yourself as a six-sided shape with a front and a back and two sides and a top and a bottom. What sense do you have of your depth from front to back? Where do you feel deepest? And what about your width? And do you get a sense of that changing as you breathe? And then what about the length from right at the top of your ribs? And then how far does the breath reach into you? How low do you sense the movement as you breathe? Does it reach just down to the bottom of your ribs, or does it reach further into your belly? Or does it reach all the way down, perhaps even into your pelvic floor? And here you can sort of consider your organisation as sort of two balloons. So you have a belly balloon, which will change shape, but not volume. And then you have an air balloon on the top of it, surrounded by your ribs with your lungs inside, which changes both its volume and its shape. How do you notice that as you just breathe here quietly? And see if you can get a sense of the beginning of that respiratory tract. So that would be wherever the air is coming in. So if you're breathing through your nose, can you sense how the air is travelling through your nose? How easy, how open is that? Do you feel any constriction, or whether it's coming through your mouth, over your tongue? Perhaps get a sense of your jaw, how your tongue's lying in your mouth as you breathe here. And I'll say at any moment, if you start to lose attention, if you feel yourself slightly nodding off, we'll do a bit of moving, quite a bit of moving, so hopefully it won't be too soporific. But rest. Don't wait for me to tell you to rest. Rest anytime you like. If you feel, especially if your attention starts to wander, just make sure that you try to keep curious. So bring your legs now to standing, so that your feet are flat on the floor, your knees are bent, but you're lying on your back still. So you're lying on your back and you just bend your knees so that your feet are flat on the floor, knees are bent. And if you have a little bit of space in between them, you'll find that you don't have to work very hard to keep them there. So you can play around with finding a different place to put your feet so that that feels an easy place to be, and that there's no effort to hold your legs there anywhere in your stomach. And notice how the breathing has changed. Those of you that have moved into a different position, notice what effect that's had and where you feel the breath coming into. And while you're there, now listen to the breath filling into the right side of your shoulder, into your right shoulder somewhere. Send your attention into your right shoulder. And up towards the clavicle. So you might like to put your left hand onto your right clavicle, just so that it sits in that little area just above it, that there's a little groove, and just have your hand gently there and think of directing the breath into your hand. So into your hand, into your clavicle. Very softly, very gently, easily. You just repeat that a few times, as though you're just pressing, using the breath to just increase a little bit of pressure into that left hand that's on your right clavicle. And then let that go, and just take a little moment to just come back to where you were in neutral and see if you notice any difference at all, even having done that teeny tiny bit of directing the breath. Is there anything different to notice about your right shoulder as compared to your left shoulder? So now come to your left shoulder. So bring your right hand somewhere around your left clavicle. And now begin to direct your breath into your hand and up into that area just above the clavicle. And this is going to be very odd for singers and often for wind players, because we're sort of trained to really breathe into the abdomen. And some of these lessons I found very odd to start off with, but they're very interesting explorations. So don't worry if you think, oh my gosh, this is wrong. I shouldn't be doing this. I'm breathing into my chest. So think of breathing into that clavicle, and then stopping breathing into it. So don't think about the out. You just think of pressing into that area very softly with the breath. So you're sort of using the breath to reach into that corner of yourself, and then stop, and then you just allow it out. Very nice. And just let your arm come down by your side and take a little moment just to sense yourself. And the whole of this lesson is now going to be a little extension of that thought of pressing into lots of little different areas and being curious as to which ones are easy to find. You'll probably find that there are some areas that are more challenging, but stay with it, don't push it, keep it easy. So now let your legs go long. And keep your arms just by your side comfortably. And so you've got a slightly different organisation of your pelvis now. And see if you can now find the little area underneath your right clavicle to the right side of your chest, and see if you can breathe into there. If you want to put your hand there, that may be nice as well. So if you put your hand under your clavicle to around the pectoral muscle on the right hand side, and see if you can allow the breath to reach into that place, so that that front right side underneath your clavicle just expands a little bit with the breath. It's like a little balloon is being blown up inside you, and then stopping, and you can take a moment and pause and then see what it's like to do it again, and each time come back to it with a new thought. You could move your hand maybe just a tiny bit and see if you can direct it in a very slightly different place in that area. And now just stand your left leg. Keep thinking about that same place so that your pelvis can roll a little bit, and see if you can roll your pelvis so that you're a little bit more on your right shoulder blade. And now begin breathing down into your right shoulder blade. So you're thinking of pressing, finding some way of pressing your right shoulder blade in the floor. You can use your left foot a little bit. And each easy breath, just hold the breath there. Think of pressing into the shoulder blade and then stopping pressing. And then let that go. Let your leg go long. Let your arm be by your side. And just keep a track of anything that you're noticing changing. And so now we'll do the other side. So think of the left clavicle. So underneath the left clavicle, and start directing your breath just underneath your left clavicle. And begin doing that with your legs long, and see how easily you can find that. So that breath reaching underneath the clavicle into where that left pectoral muscle is, somewhere around there. Each breath just finding a very soft way of expanding. And then you can bring your right leg to standing and press a little bit, so you roll your pelvis a little bit and direct that movement up towards your left shoulder. And see if you can direct that breath then to that left shoulder blade, which is making contact with the floor. How can you use the breath to press a little more into the floor? And can you get a sense of this balloon maybe opening in both directions? So there's something about a balloon. So you're expanding between your shoulder blade, your left shoulder blade, and up into that area just under your left clavicle. Just using that right leg to help you to find, and you can move it around a little bit if you just want to sort of shift the weight somewhere else to give you a bit more clarity of different places that you can find just around that left shoulder blade and under your left clavicle. Great, and then leave that, let your legs go long, Just take a little moment to rest. Let your breath just come back to neutral, tidal. So keeping your legs long, what would it be like to use the breath to lift your sternum up from the inside with the air as you fill into your lungs, into yourself? So you use the air to, and this is particularly odd for those of us that really think about abdominal breathing, but you are allowed to do it. So really use the breath to lift your sternum from the inside. And I talked about that if we stop the movement somewhere, that directs the movement somewhere else. Can you sense where you're stopping the movement happening in order to direct this? Is it somewhere in your back? So that it's sending the air into this different place. Is there a sense that you're slightly lifting your upper back away from the floor, or is that something that's able to stay quiet? So now bring both of your feet back up to standing. And let's take that a little bit further. Just do a very gentle press through your feet, and you'll notice how your tailbone maybe starts to go in the direction of rocking on your pelvis, and your tailbone wants to start a little bit leaving the floor. Don't leave the floor at the moment, but just notice if you press through your feet, how the tailbone can just rock. Do a couple of those so you can feel the press in the directions of your head, and your back will flatten a little bit into the floor. And the next time you do it, as easily as you can, and only if it is feeling easy, begin to lift your pelvis from the floor and aim to press the large vertebra that are between your shoulders into the floor, and see if you can, with your pelvis lifted up a little bit, if you can start directing your breath into that place. So right between your shoulder blades. So this is the other direction from where you were lifting your sternum. Can you sense a balloon here now? Pressing down between your shoulder blades. Is it easier on one side than the other? And can you get a sense of that balloon expanding all the way up and underneath your sternum as well? Great, and rest when you need. Actually, let's rest now, I think. So everybody bring your pelvises down. And take a moment to notice yourself, track any changes. So this time we're going to do another little bit. We're going to try and stand your left leg, but keep your right leg long. And interlace your fingers and put your hands behind your head. And very gently lift your head a little bit from the floor and see if you can roll a little bit over to the right and find your small ribs to the right side. So the floating ribs, and see what it's like to press using the breath here. So you think of increasing the pressure on the floor around those small ribs that are sort of a little bit round the back. So see if you can see what you can do with your foot, and if you have your head a little bit lifted, it'll just mean that you can easily direct your attention into that area. Don't make this effortful. You might like to have your elbows forwards rather than too wide. And do a few breaths here. So you're opening up that area in your ribs and then stopping it. And then let that go. And as you come via your back, notice any differences, and then come over to the other side. And interlace, can you interlace your hands in the other direction? So you will probably have gone to your habitual interlacing. Can you see if you can work out how to interlace your hands in the other organisation? So you think maybe one thumb will be on top in your habitual one. Just check that the other one's on top. And then put your hands behind your head in this with your right knee bent, and see if you can just roll yourself so that you find a way of lifting your head and getting into those ribs, those low ribs to your left side, so that you can really use the breath. Just press into the floor. Just do it a few times. Be very kind to yourself, be very soft, be very gentle. Don't try too hard. If you try too hard, you might notice some sort of resistance. Be very gentle with yourself. And then come back onto your back with your arms by sides. You can just have your legs long for a moment. And see what you sense around that part of your ribs, whether a little light has maybe begun to be shone around there. There's a little more awareness of what's happening as you just allow the breath in. So now bring both of your feet back up to standing. And this time, pay attention to the little area underneath your shoulder blades in your back. So you might like to press a little bit into the floor. See what you need to do to highlight that little area underneath your shoulder blades. And you can press a little bit into the left. You can press a little bit into the middle. You can press a little bit into the right side. And play around. And be quite playful with it. And you can just find those sort of three areas. See where you can press. You might find that your feet, your legs might be able to help a little bit. And then try that with your head lifted a little bit. See if that gives you a clearer idea. So you can put your hands, interlace your hands again behind your head and just lift your head just a tiny bit from the floor. And see if you can find a bit more clarity with where you're pressing. So a little bit to the left. And then you stop pressing. A little bit in the middle. And somewhere in the right. Very nice. Let your legs go long. We'll do a couple more things lying on your back and then we'll move over to the stomach. But bring your feet back to standing. And we've done a lot of exploring the ribs. What about the abdominal area? Now, with your feet standing, is there a possibility of finding the area below your ribs? Can you find the left side and use the air to press a little bit into the left side of your sort of abdominal cavity, pressing the left side of your sort of lower back a little bit into the floor? Can you use the breath to blow that up like a little balloon? And then coming into the middle where your spine is, where your lumbar spine is. And then a little bit into the right. So play around a little bit with each of those places. Notice where you can find easily. And then see if there's a slightly more challenging place that you don't quite know where it is. See if the side that you don't know can learn from the place that you do know. That's a strategy we use quite often in Feldenkrais, is for the side that's less intelligent, that you don't know, we use the side that already does know to learn from it. Great. Let that go for a moment. So next, extend your right arm above your head somewhere on the floor, somewhere very comfortable. Just don't think about it having to go very far. And have your left leg standing and roll yourself onto your right side so that your head's resting on your arm. And you'll notice which part of you is now in touch with the floor. And see if you can start to fill the right side of yourself with the breath so that you can press your waist, somewhere in your waist, into the floor. And can you find those floating ribs from here? And you can use your foot to help to direct where you're making contact with the floor. So where you whenever we press somewhere and increase pressure, something else will lift, something will lift and something else will press into the floor. So you can play around with where to press and see how much of your waist and the side of you can find. Very nice. And then when you've explored that enough, come on to the other side and see what it's like on the other side, so you can compare the two sides. So your left arm can be over your head, underneath your head, with your right leg standing, and see what it's like now to see what you can find in the left side of your ribs, around the left side of your waist. Again, you're very likely to notice differences between these two sides. What's the difference between the two sides? So that breath is reaching into your waist, into the ribs. Can you find those small floating ribs? Great. Just bring yourself back onto your back for a moment. Right, so now bring yourself onto your stomach, and if you can, have your arms a little bit overhead. So I'll let you organise your head as you need. Ideally have it in the middle if you can, if you don't squash your nose too much. And have your arms comfortable. If you need your hands underneath your head, that's absolutely fine. Be comfortable, that's the most important thing. And now send your attention to that little place around your solar plexus, somewhere just underneath the bottom of your sternum. And what would it be like to increase the pressure there? Use the breath to feel down into the floor around your solar plexus, that upper part of your belly. And as you do this, notice what your ribs are doing. How do the ribs respond as the breath reaches into this place? And now draw your right knee up to one side, to the side. So you just bend that knee, slide the knee along the floor so that it's just coming out to the side. And have your left arm extended and use your right hand underneath your left ear and see if you can find the area just below your armpit. So if you can roll a little bit from your belly with your left arm extended, lifting your head, and see how much you can find in those ribs just underneath your armpit, and see if you can start to expand there with the breath. This is somewhere we don't often go with our breathing. We don't often think about that area. See how much of that space right under your arm you can feel. And you can find the bit that's maybe higher, that might be more challenging to find. Right in the armpit, the ribs just underneath. Use the breath to explore all these little areas. And then see what that's like on the other side. So bring yourself back via your stomach and draw up your left knee. And have your right arm extended and use your left arm, your left hand just over the top of your ear, just to very gently lift your head so that you can get at that little area right in your armpit on the right side of yourself. And think of this little balloon expanding in there as you breathe. And you use your foot, use how you're rolling to find as many little areas in the side of yourself. See which bit of you can expand. And then roll back onto your stomach. Just take a little moment there. So from here, extend your right arm above your head and have your left foot so that the toes are standing, so that your ankle is bent, but your leg is straight and your right leg is just relaxed and just long. And begin to use your toes to press in the direction of your head towards your front of your right shoulder. And it'll probably take your head to lie a little bit onto your right arm, and see if you can press into the front part of your chest towards your foot, which will be more towards the clavicle and the armpit. So your right arm is extended above your head, your left foot is with the toes bent so that it's as though you can push into the floor, and use the floor to just press into the front right side of your chest, up towards your right shoulder. And think of the breath expanding into here. So you've now got the floor. We did that a little bit with the hand. See how you can use the floor. And then see what that's like on the other side. So let your left leg go long and just put the toes onto the floor of with your right foot, and have your left arm extended in front of you above your head, and see if you can press a little bit with your foot, with that right foot, pressing into that area around your armpit and clavicle. And then come back just onto your belly, just rest there for a moment. And now bring both of your feet so that the toes are in a place where they could push. And as you push through your feet, your knees will come a little bit away from the floor, and see if you can think of leaning onto the front of your chest and into the sternum. This is where boobs might get in the way, but see what you can find. And see if you can find the front of your chest and the sternum, and see how far up your sternum you can find that makes contact with the floor, and fill into that area. And just let the breath reach into that area and very softly move you there. And you just breathe into there, and then you stop so that everything just comes back to neutral, and take a moment. Very nice. I'm going to do one more thing. So let your legs go long now. Just let your legs go as they were, and just sense your belly now on the floor as that breathes. What would it be like to press the front of your belly into the floor from here? And you can have your hands wherever is comfortable. They can be under your head. Can you find the left side of your belly? And something that might help is if you bend your right knee so that your right foot just comes up. See if that just takes your pelvis over a little bit so that you can find, so just bend it with your foot straight up towards the ceiling. And then see whether you can find the left side of your belly. So your right knee bent will take you a bit to the left, and then try the other one. So bend your left knee a little bit up and see if you can find the right side of your belly and press that a little bit into the floor with the breath. And if you bring both knees bent, just see what it's like just to play around with moving that breath. You take a little bit into the left, a bit in the middle, a bit to the right. How can you shift that movement into different places? And your feet might move in the air. Something there with your legs might support you to find different bits of your belly to press into the floor. Can you find, and can you notice what's not moving, what maybe is fixing that's allowing you to do that? Great. Let that go. Bring yourself onto your back. And then just see what you see. Just notice what you notice about your breathing. So we found all sorts of places. What happens now if you allow your diaphragm to just do its thing and not control anything? A sort of sense that when we found all the possibilities, it gives the diaphragm the opportunity to go further. So it's not that we're trying to make it happen, but we just create an environment in which it maybe is able to bring more air into us. And what's your three-dimensional sense now? How deep do you feel? How wide do you feel? And where's the breath reaching down to now? How far down within yourself do you feel the movement? And check in on your jaw and your mouth and your tongue, your nose, that area around your nose, how it can soften, and just be there as an opening for the diaphragm just to draw the air into yourself. And then in your own time, just bring yourself round to your side and sit up. Great. And what would be interesting is to have a sing, go back to your instrument. If you're a wind player, it'd be very interesting to see how that maybe feeds in. And also for anyone who's a string player or any other instrument, how that quality of their breath maybe can be there to support the playing.